Why do these live streams always make me want to switch mains? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Master of None here. The remaining 3 elite specs have been revealed. ANET just did a 2-hour live stream showing off the elite specializations for Ranger, Thief and Engineer. If you missed the stream and want to watch the whole thing, there will be a link in the description. In this video, I'll have a short summary of the main mechanics and my early impressions on them. So if you just want to get a taste of everything shown with a bit more details than the little teasers, you are at the right place. One last point, if you are new to the channel or even a returning viewer, consider subscribing for more Guild Wars 2 content and End of Dragon news. This time around, I want to start with the spec that had me most excited after seeing the initial trailer, the Mechanist. From the moment I saw that trailer, I was hyped and it made me want to go back to my engineer and continue the level up challenge I started a while ago. I don't know what it is with pet classes. Somehow, they always get me excited until I notice how broken the pet AI is. There was also a little bit of that already during the live stream, where the mech was just zooming around everywhere. The Mechanist gets a mace as a main hand weapon and more importantly, access to this super cool looking Jade mech. This mech is not always out, instead you summon it in and it comes crashing down. That's not the only thing that differentiates it from Ranger pets though. Additionally, the Jade mech inherits some of your own stats. So if your character is built with a lot of power, it will also gain a lot of power. Or if you are very tanky, your mech will get that as well. The first thing that was immediately apparent to me is how gorgeous the animations are. Just look at how the mech flies into the stratosphere when it is killed or you send it away. It's really the star of the show, and I think the spec will rise or fall depending on how good the mech is and feels. Getting your mech killed will also hurt a lot since currently it goes on a 100-second cooldown and all the traits are basically focused on the mech as well. Depending on your trait choices, your mech gets equipped with different abilities, ranging from kind of the melee condition damage abilities to support things like giving alacrity or barrier, or range power damage with laser beams and rapid fire skills. Getting access to these mech skills does mean, however, that they take away your tool belt skills completely. If I'm not mistaken, this is particularly a problem for the medkit heal skill, since your self-heal on that ability is actually a tool belt skill. Talking about utility skills, the Mechanist gets signets. For the most part, these will also affect your mech in some way or form. For example, there is a shadow step signet where both you and your mech will shadow step to your enemy. Or your heal skill affects yourself and the mech as well. So there might be some interesting decision making there where you use the skill purely to keep your mech alive. The elite skill will passively reduce the recharge of all your other signets, or, when you use it, make your mech fire this giant laser beam. While this does look really cool, I'm a bit sad that it is so similar to the Holosmith Elite, which was also a giant laser beam, but hey. Alternatively, you can use this skill to summon your mech even if it is on cooldown, so there's some more interesting interplay there. I've not touched on the mace at all, and that's because on first glance it didn't look very special. Just a new weapon to play with that applies a little bit of barrier and confusion, and like most melee weapons, gives you a short leap. Visually, the spec looks amazing, but I will definitely have to try it out myself in the beta in just a few days to see how it actually feels to play. Let's move on to the Untamed, the Ranger elite specialization. This spec is supposed to be a bruiser character and is of course a throwback to the Guild Wars 1 Ranger warrior build called Bunny Thumper. He gets a hammer and, as a class mechanic, has this interesting flow to combat where either you or your pet is in this primal unleash mode, doing extra damage but also taking extra damage. On top of that, you now also get direct control over 3 of your pet's abilities instead of only 1. Further reinforcing the theme of you having a strong bond with your pet and thus having more control over it. I'll also quickly mention that your pet abilities switch to different ones as soon as your pet goes into unleashed form. It looked like these were always the same ones, no matter the pet, but I'm not 100% sure on that. In contrast to the Mechanist's mace, the hammer on the Untamed is much more integral to the spec. Depending on your stance, the hammer skills will flip over to more damaging or debilitating abilities. This plays with elite spec mechanics where you gain bonus damage and effects on CC targets, depending on the traits you choose. The hammer skills share a cooldown in both stances, which I do really like since it brings in more of the decision making element to play the class. What I'm not a fan of, however, is that only hammer gets this integral interaction with the spec. It kind of shoehorns the Untamed into one specific weapon set. I guess the counter argument would be that by doing it this way, ANET can more easily ensure that the spec feels cohesive in itself and actually provides a different gameplay experience. I'm really not sure where I stand on this, but it's definitely something to think about. Supposedly, they didn't want the other weapons to get an unleashed state because it would lead to too much power creep. CMC mentioned that they are still thinking about adding it to the other weapons, but it sounds like quite a big undertaking, so I'm skeptical that it could be done in time. Especially considering that a lot of the specs feel like they still need quite a bit of work. The new utilities for Ranger are cantrips. A standout for me is the skill Exploding Spores, where you surround yourself with these bombs, and if they all hit the same target, your target gets knocked down. There's also a shadow step here as well, so you can land your big greatsword mauls even easier. The Elite Cantrip is actually a really powerful defensive skill, giving you stability, resolution and resistance, but also a 50% damage reduction for 10 seconds. On top of that, whenever you strike a foe when you have this buff up, will reduce the recharge of the skill. So by being aggressive you will have a much higher uptime on it. I think this is exactly the type of skill the Catalyst would need to feel like an actual bruiser, but that is a bit off topic. Lastly, I just wanted to mention the 4 new pets Rangers get to tame in End of Dragons. A white tiger, a Wellow, the studio favorites a baby siege turtle and a phoenix. I really love this part about Ranger where they have something extra to look forward to in each expansion. My biggest wish, however, would be if they would implement a secret hard to get pet like the Rainbow Phoenix from GW1 for example, which was this abnormally large phoenix that you could only tame after maxing out like 10 titles. Last but definitely not least, the Thief Elite specialization Specter. Specter is shaping up to be a support spec that utilizes shadow magic to buff allies and damage enemies. There are already all these memes floating around of how every class is becoming a thief, while thief becomes a necromancer. Memes aside, it does describe the Spectre pretty well. You get access to main hand Scepter and Shadow Shroud. Your base initiative drops down to 9 and Shadow Shroud functions very similarly to Death Shroud from Necromancer, in a way that it is your second health bar. You charge it by spending initiative or using the steel replacement skill Siphon on enemies. There is a lot more to talk about here though, which I was actually quite surprised about. I specifically mentioned that you had to use Siphon on enemies to get Shadow Force, since a big part of this spec is that you can often directly target allies instead as well. ANET called this modal skills. The Scepter makes the most out of this new mechanic, and every single skill can target either an enemy or an ally, which changes the effect of the skill. Why is this so important? Because every other healing skill in the game is either an AoE field that you can target, an AoE around you or your enemy. I remember ArenaNet talking about the design decisions in Guild Wars 2 way back before the game first came out. Back then, they said that it was a deliberate decision to not have the traditional healers in the game, because they didn't want you to play the UI and pay more attention to what is happening on the screen instead. It is also the reason why they gave every class a heal skill. It's just at a later stage, when the first elite specs and raids came out, that these dedicated support healer builds started to emerge, thanks to the new elite spec design. So it's really interesting to me that they are now trying to bring back the traditional healer functionality. To be frank, I love that they are trying it, since anything that can change up gameplay is a good thing in my book. However, and this is a very big however, the problem I see with this type of healing is that Guild Wars 2 with its current UI can't support it nicely. Now what do I mean by that? I think trying to click your ally when tons of enemies are on the screen is probably going to feel very annoying and imprecise. This is why in Guild Wars 1, World of Warcraft or many other games that have a healer, you click on the party frame to target allies. And I have no doubt that you would do the same thing with the Specter, but the Guild Wars 2 UI is not customizable at all, which might make this much less comfortable than it should be. If you have played a healer in another game, you probably did what most people do, and that is to take the party frames and put them way more centered on your screen. That way, you still have a good overview of what is happening in the fight, but can also keep an eye out on the health of your teammates and targets heal them much more efficiently. In the end, this might not be that big of a deal as I make it seem to be, but I do worry about it. This could be a huge shift for the game and the types of gameplay it can offer. So I do hope that it might lead ArenaNet to take another hard look at the customizability of the UI. Enough about the UI though. I love that with this spec, Thief gets a one-hand weapon, because it means that you get a bunch of dual skills as well, that change based on your offhand. Another interesting thing about your steel replacement Siphon. Whenever you use it on an ally, it kind of marks that ally as your primary support target. When you now go into Shroud, you will see that there is a bond between you and that ally. By using your Shroud skills on enemies, you now also automatically support your ally. I like this flavor a lot since it means that you can still be a thief that is aggressively attacking enemies and support that way. As a new utility class, Thief gets wells. Initially, I was a bit disappointed when I heard that since it made the Shadow Necro theme even stronger. That was exactly how I played my Power Necro back in the days, before Heart of Thorns was released. Immobilize people with your dagger and then drop all the wells on them. However, I think ANET did a good job by making the wells actually feel unique and flavorful to Thief. Mainly due to how every well also is a shadow step. The most interesting skills to me are Well of Bounty and Well of Sorrows. Well of Bounty pulls us boons to allies, but it will give you boons that you currently don't have. And Well of Sorrows is going to do the same thing to enemies but with conditions. This probably means that you want to have less impactful boons like regeneration or swiftness already covered. That way you can get much more value out of this skill. It also makes it really versatile and could help fill the missing quickness or alacrity if the other supports are slacking, so to say. Finally, I'll just quickly mention the elite skill. It's basically Gravity Well from Chronomancer, but with a teleport attached to it. It will damage enemies and pull them to the center of the field. Interestingly enough, it didn't have any conditions on it, which struck me as a bit odd since they are really pushing the condition support aspect for the rest of the spec. I would love to see how Spectre performs in PvP. Imagine supporting your Reaper with it, just giving it perma quickness, healing and turning your teammate into even more of a monster. Overall, I'm super hyped again, which is a bit dangerous because we all saw what happened last beta. So I try to keep my excitement in check and will definitely try out all the specs when the beta starts in just a few days, October 26. I'm curious to see how the ally targeting feels on Spectre and what it is like to play with the Golem on the Mechanist. Keep an eye out on this channel if you are interested in that. What is your very first impression of these new elite specs? Let me know in the comments below and I hope to see you in the next one.